Salutations, mortals and children of the night. I'm the Vampire Otaku, and this is another episode 40 of You Should Read, where I persuade you to read something that might not be on your radar, or something that you might have any interest in. Well, it's going to be Yowamushi Pedal, my favorite sports manga. So, grab your helmet, grab your clipless shoes, grab your riding gloves. Let's talk about it. So it's World Bicycling Day today, and I thought, what better day than to talk about this amazing manga, Yowamushi Pedal. There's a lot that I want to discuss, a lot of characters, not quite as much plot, but still an important plot, and just a nice overarching theme. Before I get into all that, I want to show you each cover, spine, and back of each volume of Yowamushi Pedal. Starting with volume 1. I'm going to try to quickly show you these because there's so much to talk about. It's my favorite character, Naruto. He's awesome and flashy. I've wanted to talk about this manga for a long time. I've watched the anime. Still watching it because there's new episodes, and I love biking. I actually race. Haven't raced in a few years, but I do enjoy the sport very much. I regularly watch Tour de France and try to keep up on the latest bike companies like Cervelo, and you also have Cannondale, one behind me, Trek, Bianchi, Canalgo. It's all these amazing bike companies. And cyclists too. One of my favorites are Peter Sagan. This cover looks super cool. This manga is really fun. It looks really unique. And there are so many characters. Now keep in mind, these are omnibuses. There are 22 out right now, so that makes 44 volumes in Tokuban editions. So far I have 21. I believe that volume 3 and volume 10, I'm not sure, I haven't looked, but they're very hard to find. This guy was ready for COVID. I love this cover as well. Bias, favorite character, but it's beautiful colors and just beautiful layout. I also love this cover. This is the main villain and he is psycho. But he is one of my favorite villains that I've read or watched since the villain of Diamond is Unbreakable from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4. Kita, he's insane. I love this character. He rides to classical music, and I am a big fan of classical music. Very cool. All the homies on the front. Gang gang. I like this character a lot too. He's very serious and unrelenting. Another one of my favorite characters. He names his muscles, which I'm going to talk about later on. Super funny, super cool. Hands down my favorite sports manga. Slam Dunk is amazing. Prince of Tennis is really cool, but I love Yowamushi Pedal. Obviously I'm biased because this is my favorite sport, but I just love the way it's written. And this is the last one that I own. I am currently waiting to get volume 22. Alright, before we really get into this video, for all my friends and newcomers to my channel that aren't really familiar with cycling, let's go over a few terms. We have attacking, which is when you suddenly use a burst of energy and a burst of strength and you gain speed very quickly to overtake another cyclist, and you pass them up and you keep going and keep going and keep going and you just leave them in the dust. It's not just for one or two cyclists. It's like if you're trying to leave an entire group sometimes. Sometimes an attack, it's basically a gamble because every human being has a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of wattage, a certain amount of strength. So once that strength runs out, the other people that didn't burn their energy out as fast can slowly catch up. You have to calculate how much strength and how much energy you have versus how much longer and how much further you have to go in a race. So a lot of people don't realize that when you're bike racing or racing in general, you're also in a sense playing chess, because you have your limitations and you have to calculate your opponent's limitations. And not everybody's going to be on their best day. Not everybody's going to be at their full strength. And then some people might be evolving and getting stronger as the race goes on. I say that to say that is the first term, attacking. Then you have sprinting. Sprinting is very similar except for a much shorter distance and a much greater use of power. And you typically use it at the very end of a stage. A stage is one section of a race, or one part, one day of a race. So if you have a 3-day race, depending on how the race is set up, it could be 3 stages or it could be multiple stages within that race where you get points. And certain stages have certain prizes and certain points that are suited for certain cyclists. One stage might be considered King of the Mountain. King of the Mountain is where you have a incline that is very high, and you typically have people known as climbers, and they usually are lighter, and they're a lot skinnier, and their bikes are light as well, and they have a lot of strength in their small frames, and they can easily get up the mountain because when you're going up something, gravity works against you even more. Gravity wants to pull you back down. So you have the climber specialist. The last part of the race is always geared towards the sprinters, unless it's not a flat surface. Sprinters work well on flat surfaces. You have descenders. Descenders are really good going downhill. Going downhill, you think, well, it's easy to go fast. But when you have twists and turns, it's very difficult to maintain that speed. You just need a level of bravery, a level of preciseness, and full bike control. And just knowing how to pivot and shift your weight. You have your descenders, your climbers, your sprinters. You have your all-arounders where they're good at everything, but they haven't really mastered any of it. They're just good at all of it. So they can easily sub for any other cyclist. You have your domestiques, where they are fast, but their job is to make sure that their teammates have water, they have food. So if you're racing and you don't get a chance to grab food, your domestique will have a lot of water bottles like inside their jersey, and food as well. And they ride up to their captain, they ride up to their sprinter, to their climber, whoever they need to ride up to, and they deliver the water or they deliver the food. Those are most of the people that you will find in a bike race. You also have the time trial specialist. Time trials are very, very demanding. Like, you ride by yourself. Road racing, which is the focal point of this manga, is a team sport. Everybody works together, and when you think that you can do everything alone, it just makes everything difficult for everybody. But some people do it anyway. Now, when you're time trialing, you're by yourself. and you use a special bike called the time trial bike or the TT bike. And it's more aerodynamic. It has handlebars that are a lot different than most handlebars you see. 2 sets of handlebars actually. Handlebars that vertically go in the middle and put you in this position to where you're completely aerodynamic, and you have handlebars that go on the side just in case you might lose your balance or lose your footing, if you will, when you're riding that bike, because when you're in this position you don't have as much control. The bike usually is a shape that can slice through the wind, because when you're biking, your teammates can shield you from the wind. Wind is a big enemy for road cyclists sometimes. If you have a crosswind or a headwind, no matter how strong you are, you're just not going to go as fast as you would without that headwind. So if you have a teammate in front of you blocking the wind, you get to conserve your energy and use less strength. And then you switch places, you give each other a break so both of you can last longer and also save more energy and save more strength for when you really need it. With a time trialist, you don't have anybody to do that, so you and your bike have to be as aerodynamic as you possibly can. And sometimes being aerodynamic can sacrifice power and sacrifice strength. So it's a fine line. In a time trial, you're by yourself against the clock, and it's your power and your aerodynamic balancing that helps you get the fastest time. So that's time trial. I believe I've covered most of the important things with biking. We don't call it seats, we call it saddles. Let's see what else. We use clipless pedals, and we use shoes that clip into the pedals. I'll demonstrate. I have a pair of Italian CDs on right now. We use these shoes right here. This part clips into the pedal, even though they're called clipless pedals. And they're very stiff. The bottom is made out of carbon fiber, so it doesn't flex or bend really, so you can put all your strength into the pedal. You don't have to worry about your feet sliding off the pedal either. So there's a level of safety there. Let's see. And you have your bike parts as well, your derailleurs, your crank, your brakes, the frame itself, the seat post, which is the part that in a sense goes into the bike frame and holds the saddle up. And you have your bike computer. Bike computers let you know how many calories you're burning, how fast you're going, how far you've traveled, how long you've been riding for, and sometimes they even have GPS, which is really cool. You can use your phone for it, but the bike computer specializes in a few more things that your phone might not be able to quite grasp. Like, for instance, how fast you're pedaling, which is known as cadence. I'm sure you can get a heart rate monitor on your phone as well. Phones have come a long way. But your phone isn't going to tell you your wattage, how much power you're putting into your bike. So the bike computer, along with a few other parts, can really help you just get your training dialed down as to the minuscule millimeter. It's really interesting how much science goes into the sport. And now I talked about all the terms, let's talk about the story. I'm going to be reading off a script that I wrote, and some of it's going to be kind of just off the top of my head, things that I remember as I talk about this amazing story. So, the main cast of Yowamushi Pedal go to a school called Sohoku High School. It's a great school that allows our heroes to train and to catch up on schoolwork after training camps and races. I think it's a really interesting school. You don't get a lot of details in any of their schools because they're mostly focused on bike racing and bike training. I think it's amazing that the school is so lenient towards this niche sport. But maybe in Japan, I'm not sure, cycling is a bigger sport than it is in America. In America, we have football, American football. A lot of football players have gotten similar treatment where they've been able to redo assignments, and get a later time to do said assignments because they were in the game or they were training. And the teachers understand that having really good football players in their school makes their school look more prestigious, and it makes their school get more attention, which helps them get funded more. So it's pretty cool. Our main character is Onada Sakamichi. There are some things that I neglected to write here, so I'll just say them now. Onada is a really interesting character because he doesn't realize that he's been training himself for years on his bike, and he doesn't realize how fast and how strong he is, and how he's developed and nurtured a certain riding style that was invented by Lance Armstrong. A lot of people don't like Lance Armstrong because he won Tour de France like 7 times and they found out he was doping, but a lot of the cyclists were doping, so I kind of feel nobody should be doping really, but at the same time, when all your opponents are doing it, it's kind of hard not to. I'm aware that he wasn't exactly the best person to work with because he was just so gung-ho on winning, and being kind and being a decent person wasn't always the first thing. But I didn't personally know Lance Armstrong, so I don't know, maybe people were jealous, maybe people were angry that he won so much. I don't know if he was actually rude or a hard person to work with. I just know his work ethic was amazing, and he invented some really interesting ways to ride the bike, and he made bike riding really popular in America, and I'm grateful for that because that led us to having more bike shops, more people out riding, and just more accessories and things that might not be available to us just because there was interest in it, because everybody was interested in seeing Lance Armstrong, a guy from Texas, just win it all. Almost a beach cruiser, a bike with like a basket in the front, not a racing bike at all. In the show, and I believe in the manga as well, they called it a mommy bike, which is really insulting, really rude. Basically, the bike didn't really have a high top speed. You just pedaled very, very quickly and you wouldn't get anywhere. But he took this bike and rode it over 20 miles to go to Akihabara. He's a big fan of anime and figures and all those nerdy things. And he didn't want to spend all of his money taking the bus or taking the train and getting there. He wanted to save every dollar to buy his favorite stuff. So he would ride this bike and we ride it up hills. And when you ride up hills, that higher cadence, that easier gear selection is a way to get up hills. Some people use a big gear and they really push up hills, but some people have a faster gear and they spin, as they call it, up the hill. And he developed that technique kind of by accident. I don't think he really cared about bikes like that in the beginning, but he just wanted to save money and get to his favorite stores. So that was really interesting. A lot of main characters, they just get a gift, they get their power, but he earned his power by accident, which is a great way to write that. So our main character, Onada, he has a dream and he has a hope that he can get into an anime club in high school. He wants to talk about all of his favorite shows, talk about figures, all things nerdy. And the anime club was disbanded, so he is trying his best to get the anime club back together or to basically start his own. And no one wants to do it, no one cares, everybody's ignoring him. And he meets a classmate named Imaizumi. Imaizumi is obsessed with bike racing and he just wants to essentially win and dominate and be strong. But he's quiet, but he's not shy, but he is quiet unless you're really talking about biking. And he doesn't light up or get bright, but he's like, yeah, there's something I could talk about. I can connect with you. But he's not like bright and happy and go lucky about biking. It's just like almost a career for him. And in a sense, it probably will be how serious he is about it. They meet up and Onada tries to convince him to join the anime club. Imaizumi thinks to himself, I'm probably not going to join this club. But he's also thinking, I see this kid bike with this terrible bike so far. He gets curious, he gets interested. He's like, this kid could potentially be fast, he could be disciplined, he could be a really good cyclist. So he challenges him to a race. He says, if you can beat me in a race, I'll join your anime club. Knowing he has years of experience over Onada and a much lighter, faster bike, it seems way too easy. So Imaizumi decides to give Onada a few minute head start. It might have been a 3-minute head start. Onada, being the nice guy that he is like, this might be too long. I don't know if he'll catch up. So he slows down in the middle of the race And, Imaizumi super catches up. Passes him up like he's standing still. And Onada's panicking. He's like, he really comes to the realization that he wants friends. He starts biking harder than ever. And on the uphill, which is his specialty, even though he doesn't know it, he actually keeps up with Imaizumi, and Imaizumi is shocked. He wins the race. He's got the experience, he's got the power, he's got the speed. But Imaizumi is like, yeah, you gotta join the bike club. So Onada joins the bike club, makes a lot of friends, his life has changed forever. Our next character is Imaizumi Shunsuke. He's an antisocial cyclist who is very technical with his riding style and his knowledge about racing in general. In middle school, he won lots of bike races and was nicknamed Hotshot by fellow racer Naruto, my favorite character. Imaizumi really believes in Onada and his team. He has a rivalry with the racer named Midoshuji, and he is very disciplined in his riding style. His discipline is one of his greatest strengths and one of his greatest weaknesses. He's never able to use all of his power and all of his energy because there's like a limiter in his mind telling him, no, you have to wait till the last moment. You have to make sure that you're not completely exhausted or tired. But his cornering ability, his knowing exactly when to upshift and when to downshift, when to hit the brakes, when to release the brakes. He's just a technical genius. He needs to break out and become the monster that he really is. Our next character is Naruto Shouchi. My apologies. Shokichi. He's a flashy cyclist who is very good at sprinting and to show off. He really cares about his team and Onada. He has his own rivalry with Midoshuji. Naruto swallows his pride and changes his riding style to help his team and to also be a better cyclist. He is selfless and he also shows a lot of maturity and growth. Naruto supports his team by being strong and giving everything that he has. He inspires me to be a stronger cyclist and just be a more selfless person, because I believe that as I go through life, I become more selfish, trying to make sure that I do everything that I can for myself, try to make sure that I utilize my time in the best way that I can. So it's really nice to see characters who are willing to risk it all for their teammates and for their friends, and I love being reminded of that. Naruto is a character that really wears his heart on his sleeve, and I love that about him. I love the fact that he's honest about how important people cheering and supporting him is to him. He doesn't try to hold it back or try to make himself seem meek or modest. He's like, when people are supporting me, when people are chanting my name, it gives me power, it gives me strength, and it makes me feel like a superstar. And at the end of the day, he wants to be a rock star on his bike, and I love that. Our next character is Manami Sangoku. He's a free-spirited cyclist and a very aloof person. But when he's really racing, his style of riding changes and is very unique and explained well. In real life, no one really talks about how cyclists are affected by the weather. We talk about how the wind might slow us down, or bad conditions might make it harder to corner or be technical, or even put us in danger of falling off our bikes. But we don't talk about people who have a almost sixth sense and they work with nature. People who are so in tune that they know when the wind is about to flow, how they breathe in the oxygen to use it for strength. Manami is very good at knowing which direction the wind is going to blow, how hard it's going to blow, and when it's going to blow. And he takes that exact opportunity in time to sprint, to use his strength, to do whatever it takes to gain speed. He works with nature instead of against nature, which makes him a formidable opponent. A lot of cyclists kind of work against nature. They're like, all right, the wind is blowing against me, I gotta pedal harder. Manami just works with the wind. He contorts his body in a way that he can cut through the air, or he kind of sprints and gets on top of the bike and climbs up the hill better because there's a backwind. Also, he and Onada have the only personalities in the manga that are adjacent to each other. Everybody else wants to win. They're doing it for their parents. They're doing it for attention. They're doing it to get stronger or to be better people. Onata and Manami ride their bike strictly for the enjoyment of riding. Onata rides, to make friends and to connect with people, but he genuinely enjoys bike riding. And Manami also genuinely enjoys bike riding. And that makes them some of the most dangerous people to race. Because once they're having fun, they can't tell that they're pushing their limits. They can't tell that they're tired. They can't tell that what they're doing is hard. They don't know until the race is over. So, with that being said, they have no limiters. They're just having fun. Manami is also really good at remaining calm in those situations because he's so aloof. He's an expert hill climber along with Onata. They're both really good, but they both have different techniques. Manami has a lot of power, even though he's light. So he just goes up and up and up in gears and goes faster and faster. He doesn't know his limit, but once he reaches his limit, he's done. So he has to be very careful, but at the same time, his personality isn't careful. So that's his double-edged sword. Onata, his ability is to spin the crank very quickly uphill, so it doesn't take as much energy. But his downfall is the fact that he tends to not believe in himself, and he overthinks and worries about everything, and that makes him doubt his own power. And he gets so far into his own head, into his own mind, that he loses his speed and his power. And it's up to his teammate to remind him, hey, you're amazing, you're fast, you're our uphill specialist, you got this. And he gets stronger mentally later on, but that's his handicap. So it's really interesting to see these two characters that are almost perfect in their sport have such unique strengths and unique handicaps and unique weaknesses. Our next character is Todo Jinpachi. He's a climbing specialist at the Hokane school and a typical pretty boy. His rivalry with Makishima is wholesome and years long. They are opposites, but still pretty and skilled at biking. Uphill is their specialty, and they do it in their own way. Jinpachi is a silent style rider. While riding, he throws off his opponent because the opponent doesn't even know that he's there. They call his style the sleeper climb, and it's difficult to be able to know when to react when you don't even know your opponent is there. You're riding, you're conserving your energy, and this guy just, you don't hear anything. You don't even feel his presence. So that's a really powerful weapon in his arsenal. Our next character is Makishima Yusuke. He is a mentor to Onata and rival to Jinpachi. He is called the Peak Spider. He has an excessive lean to his riding style as he quickly bikes up a hill. He is very quiet, but also not shy. His long hair and carefree attitude clashes with his sense of responsibility. He inspires Onata to find his own way of riding up hills quickly and to not copy anyone else's style. He also wears his heart on his sleeve, but he doesn't talk about it. He just wears it, and if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you won't know what type of person he is. He's a very interesting character because he's very passionate, but only in his own head. Like, other people around him just think he's calm and collected, or might have some random explosive anger that you see the results of, but you never see in action. So our next character is Yukihiro Kuroda. He's known as the Black Cat or Delivery Man. He was very gifted and athletic in most sports. That caused him to be arrogant and entitled. But after being scolded by Arakita and beaten in a race by Manami, before he was humble, he really wanted to fight Arakita, but Arakita refused and only wanted to fight Kuroda on a bike. He's very good at climbing, but became better at cornering and overtaking other racers in races. His technical skill grew as he trained more. He's not a main character in the series, but he's really interesting. Each character has a character arc, and I didn't cover every character, but he is a really fun character. He's calm, but he races in a brutal way. He gets so close to the corners that he cuts himself on the railing, he hits stuff, he hits tree branches, and he just keeps riding. Like, his jersey would be ripped up. Oh yeah, by the way, these are called jerseys. And the cycling shorts with the padding. And his muscles are softer, but still well defined. So he's very flexible and very light. He has a really good body and physique for the sport. Our next character is Miki Kanzuki, who is related to the other Kanzuki who owns the bike shop in this manga, which I'll talk about a little bit later. She's very passionate about bicycles, and she is the manager of the Sohoku Racing Club. She lights up when you're talking about biking and has known Imaizumi for years. She encourages Onada to do his best, and she really cares about her team. When you're not talking about biking, she's almost an NPC. And that is one of the weak points about this manga, and I feel a lot of mangas, especially shonens, the women and girls that are written in the stories don't have a lot of personality, or if they do have personality, it's cookie cutter, or it's not a very unique personality. It's simply a personality that fits into the standard of almost character progression for the male lead or even other male side characters. So that's a weak point in this manga. I heard that there is a cycling manga that's an all girls team. I don't know if it's out in English, but I definitely would love to check that out. Our next character is Tsujimoto Terufumi. Tsujimoto has some of the biggest character development in this story. He is book smart and knows all about cycling and cycling techniques, and he proclaims himself as an experienced rider. But when it comes down to riding fast and being strong, he's not really good at bike racing at all. He's not very fast, and he doesn't have any specialties. Seeing Imaizumi race, however, inspires him to try harder and be competitive, and to become a better cyclist. He improves a lot, but doesn't quite make the cut, which is super inspirational and very unpredictable. The way that he trained and his character arc and the time that they spent on that character arc, you would really think that he would join the team and that he would have some type of specialty or strength. But he just wasn't fast enough, and that's realistic. Sometimes in life, just because you tried really hard, it doesn't mean that you're going to be good enough. It doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. It doesn't mean that you're going to make it. Everything is a gamble. So he doesn't make the cut, he doesn't make the team, but he still supports the team with all of his heart. Which shows how amazing his character is. Like, even though he didn't make it, he's not bitter, he's not angry, he did his best, and he's still supporting the team that he loves. Our next character is Uzumida Toichiro. He started off as a chubby person, but he became obsessed with working out and is just inspired and obsessed with getting the perfect body for cycling. He wanted his muscles to become a weapon. He is a sprinter and one of the fastest in the show. He is very honorable and doesn't take kindly to disrespect, even if someone is disrespecting his rivals. He named his muscles, which I thought was hilarious, which I spoke of earlier. It's a cool Easter egg, the names that he chose for his muscles. Both of his pecs are named after the Schleck brothers, which are popular racers probably back in the early 2000s, around the time of Lance Armstrong's, reign on Tour de France. Their names are Andy and Frank Schleck, and they are professional racers that participated in the Tour de France back in the day. His back muscle he named after Fabien Cancellara, who was famous for his Tour de France time trials. He's super fast, and he's just a very smooth rider, and he would get some of the fastest time trials in Tour de France, which is a huge deal because a lot of cyclists in the Tour de France aren't strong in time trials and strong on the road, but he was one of the few that had very fast time trials and was just fast in all spaces. He was a good climber. His sprinting was pretty good. He would attack. He was just an all-arounder, just good, just about everything. Our next character is Toji Kanzaki, who was the owner of the Kanzaki bicycle shop and related to Miki. He regularly fixes Sohoku's bikes and is their team mechanic. He quickly noticed that Onada's potential after looking at his bike, his mommy bike. He noticed that it was set up for low speed, high cadence, which is gonna be amazing up hills. Now down hills and flats, you're gonna be slow, but uphill, it's actually a really good way to ride. So he knew before everybody else besides Imaizumi that Onada was gonna be a really good cyclist. Next we have Junta Teshima, who is self-proclaimed an ordinary man. Even though he's in high school, he called himself an ordinary man, which is kind of funny. He's a character that worked really hard at bike racing and never got far. He worked with his best friend, Oyagi Hajime, to help him get really good results. Junta's best skill was strategizing. He and Oyagi shared a glove that said certain victory. So they both had a glove. When you put those gloves together, the kanji on it said certain victory, which was super cool. Basically, them working together meant that they were gonna win no matter what. And I think that is an amazing friendship, an amazing teamwork ethic. So they ride really well in sync. When I was talking about earlier how cyclists kind of ride in front of each other to protect each other from the wind, they do it better than anyone in the show. Like there are millimeters between their tires as they ride behind and in front of each other. And they can predict each other's movements and flow with each other like water. It's really cool to watch. They work really well together and they train really well together. The next character is Aogi Hajime. He's very quiet and focused and is a sprinter who works really hard and is really fast. His friendship with Junta has helped him become a faster cyclist and has pushed him farther than he would ever make it alone. He's very good at conserving energy and knowing when to go all out and when to rest. Our next character is the villain of the story, Midosuji Akira. The main villain of the story, he uses dirty, undermined tricks to win races. One time, he told Imaizumi that his mom got hit by a car or she was really sick, which made Imaizumi basically drop out the race to check on his mom, who he found was just fine, because he felt like Imaizumi was the only person that could beat him, so he wanted him out of the race. That's pretty messed up. He'll do just about any and everything to win a race, but he's very fast and has unnaturally long legs and arms, and he rides a smaller frame so it could be lighter. I don't really recommend doing that in real life because if your bike isn't properly fit to you, you can have knee issues, back problems, shoulder problems. It's very important to get your bike professionally fit for you when you are getting into the sport, because the harder you ride, the longer you ride, the more prone you are to injury. So you want to make sure that your bike is comfortable and you want to make sure your bike is fit properly for your body. That means your saddle placement, how far up it is, how far back it is, how much of a tilt is in it, how high your saddle is, how long your handlebar stem is, how far your handlebars go out. Let's see. The bike frame itself, you don't want it to be too small or too big. You don't want your legs to extend all the way when you're pedaling. Everything counts, everything matters. Our next character is Ashikibe Takuto. He's a newer character in the series. He was in the series before, but wasn't talked about because he was banned from racing because he did some really crazy stuff in a race. He comes back around later on in the series and he's racing for Team Hokane. He used to be friends with Teshima Junta, who got him into cycling. Ashikibe played piano and listens to classical music while racing and rocks his body like a metronome while riding hard. He's very tall. I think he's like 6'7", which is very tall for a high schooler, and even taller, for a cyclist. He's possibly one of the tallest characters in the manga, and he's quite aloof. Once he gets serious about riding, he's very powerful and very fast. Our next character is Ishigaki Kotaru. He's a member of Midoshuji's team and actively tries to be the conscience of Midoshuji. He's a hard worker and has a lot of stamina. Our next character is Koga Kimitaka. He is known as the stamina simpleton. He can ride and ride and ride without getting tired like a machine. But due to an injury where he crashed his bike at a race, he has to sit out for a lot of races. Koga doesn't think that Junta deserves to race on the Sohoku team, so he races against him for the spot on the team. After losing to Junta, he gains respect for him and is kind and really cares about his team. But he's always cared about his team. He's helped work on the bikes, he makes sure that everybody has food and water, and he's just really responsible and just a really strong character. He was really important in the training arc that they had because he pushed Junta to be a much stronger cyclist and to have some self-love and some self-respect for himself. Next character we have is Kinjo Shingo. He's like a father figure to the team, even though he's the same age as Makishima and Taro Korojin. Oh, my apologies. Taro Korojin. He cares deeply for his team and trusts them with his dreams. He has a rivalry with Fukutomi, who cheated in a race and caused him to crash and get injured by pulling on his clothes as they race. Kinjo never wanted revenge or even wanted or felt hostility towards Fukutomi. He simply wanted to beat him in a race fair and square. He is honorable, patient, and has an iron will. Our next character is Taro Korojin. He is big and strong and a very fast sprinter with a huge appetite. He eats a lot. He dotes on Aogi and Junta and wants to see them win. He helped them become stronger cyclists and never gave up on them, hoping that they never gave up on themselves. He's fast and races with Naruko a lot. They trash talk each other and they both sprint very quickly, and they're both flashy in their own ways. He's a hard worker and loves his team. Next character we're going to talk about is Fukutomi. Fukutomi is the captain and ace of the Hakone team. He is very powerful and very fast, but he has a god complex at first. He believes that no one can beat him. He believes he's all powerful. And his downfall was when someone actually was beating him. And it caused him to show the nastiest aspects of his personality. He was so delusional that he couldn't believe he was being beat. So he reached out his hand and grabbed another cyclist's jersey and essentially pulled him down. And it caused that cyclist to crash. The cyclist is Kinjo. After that, Fukutomi really wanted to find redemption. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted to redeem himself. So he trained harder than ever, and he really wanted to race Kinjo again, fair and square. His team against their team, and even them against each other. He kind of looks like a great value Ichigo from Bleach. Sorry about that, I had to say it. He has a very calm demeanor, and he's just an all-arounder just like Kinjo. He's very powerful, and he's a great captain to his team. And he's a very interesting character. You would think that he was going to be the villain, but he just turns out to be one of the greatest rivals. And he really makes the bike racing fun because his team almost seems like perfection, while Sohoko's team is just kind of falling apart and barely holding on. But they still see each other as rivals, and they're hoping that they can get their chance to really go against each other. So that makes the show and the manga really fun to read and watch. Yowamushi Pedal's plot is pretty simple. The main character, Onada, doesn't have a lot of friends and just wants to make them through animes and figures and collecting things, a lot of nerdy things. Sounds like me. He makes a lot of friends and learns that cycling is more than just cheap transportation to Akihabara. He learns that it's a team sport that pushes your body and pushes your mind and takes a lot of strategy. We learn about cycling through Onada and learn how friendships and rivalries can be created just through bike riding. The characters connect through sports and vulnerability, and sometimes dreams, goals, and trauma. Some characters even connect by being opposites. Kinjo and Fukutomi connect after trauma, after a bike crash, and Fukutami seeing the worst of himself. Kinjo's forgiveness and S-tier sportsmanship really creates their bond. Onada and Manami both share the fundamental joy of bike riding, which helps them become friends, and it helps them push against each other and be the strongest cyclists that they can be. The overarching theme is simply never giving up and also knowing that you're not alone. And the villain of this story, Midoshuji Akira, is an amazing villain because he goes against the overarching theme. He's selfish and only believes in himself. And at some point, he does give up. He comes back later stronger than ever, and he does not believe in the power of friendship or camaraderie. He believes it to be a waste of time. He is also drawn as very weird and gross and not loved by the crowd as he races. However, as the crowd sees his power and speed, they see him as cool and they see him as interesting. And that in itself is a very interesting concept, how people basically would root against the character and not like a character because of their nasty attitude or something bad that they've done, and turn around and enjoy and have support and love that character just because they're really good at something. You have musical artists that do horrible things, or actors, celebrities that are not the best people, but their talent is so good that people still love them anyway. It's a juxtaposition and a mirror to society, I believe. Onada is an amazing main character because he wasn't just gifted his ability. He worked very hard for it without even knowing it. And it was really just a form of transportation, riding his bike. But it was set up. His mom was very concerned about his safety. She didn't want him riding that fast. So she got smaller gear for him, which caused him to be a monster climbing hills. Like, everything was fit together to help him and nurture him to be the cyclist that he is. But it's all very believable and all likely. The story takes his time showing his improvement and showing how he learns things. And he finds himself getting slower because he stops believing in himself and he stops believing in his skill. And that's realistic. Sometimes we doubt ourselves and we can't do as good as we could if we believed in ourselves. It shows that the physical activity and the mental activity and the mental strength is very important for sports, not just the physical. The mangaka, Wataru Watanabe, did extensive research on cycling and the shoes, the bikes, the frame. He even went to see the Tour de France in person. And I love that because as a cyclist myself, I did my own research years ago getting into the sport and training. And I can tell that he knows what he's talking about and that he's passionate about it and he enjoyed writing about it. Now, when I read My Dress Up Darling, at first you could tell that research was done, but it was clear that didn't really know what he's talking about in some parts when it came to sewing. Later on, you got to see that some parts were very accurate and some parts were told correctly, but in the beginning, there were terms that were being used that weren't being used for the correct terminology or just situation. Like, we're talking about bobbins and we're talking about thread tension for parts that really just need to be talked about pattern creating. So it was kind of off and it kind of made me not enjoy the manga. But this manga, we're talking about the shoes clipping in, the bike computer, the handlebars, the wheels. He knows what he's talking about, and it just makes it that much more fun to read and easier for me to suggest it to you, because as you learn things about this manga, you can go out and do it yourself. Now, obviously, there are some things that are exaggerated for more hype and more fun, but those things, they seem exaggerated. So you're not going to go out and rock your body like a metronome to go fast. And if you do, you'll realize that it's not going to help you go fast. There's a specific way to sprint and a specific way to ride to really help you achieve speed. Okay, we go to the power of friendship, which is strong in this shonen sports manga. It's written well and very detailed, however. Characters struggle together to reach their common goals. They also cheer each other on and push each other to be the very best that they can be. Pokemon. Even if you're not a cyclist or not a fan of sports or sports manga, this manga is a great introduction to the genre. It's hype, it's exciting, it's easy to follow, and has a great story. Now granted, the story isn't the strongest part. That still doesn't stop it from having a great story. The strongest part is obviously the characters, which you have in abundance. There's over 20 characters that are talked about frequently and have their own arcs and even show their past. And I love that other characters on other teams are important just like the main team. So that's awesome. It's a longer series with 22 omnibuses, which equals out to 44 Tokuban singles. But in Japan, I believe it's up to 60 or 70 something volumes, so fingers crossed we get all of it. It's a blast to read, and you'd get through it relatively quickly. The characters change and get older, and it's really fun to see them mature and graduate high school. It's fun to see the characters learn from one another and become better people and stronger in their sport. In conclusion, you should read Yowamushi Pedal because it is unique with its art and with its story, and it was made with love. You can tell that Watanabe really enjoys cycling, and it's blasted across the panels. If you enjoy eccentric characters, you're gonna love it, and you should also read it if you enjoy well-written rivalries, friendships, and methodic villains. This is an amazing villain. There are strange, charming, and unique characters in this story. And the art is unique, but if you don't like it, you can always try the anime, which looks a little bit more standard, looks a little more easy to digest, if you will. And that is why you should read Yowamushi Pedal. It's an amazing story. It's mostly readily available, and it's really fun. And it could possibly get you out the house. You can read a few chapters, a few volumes, and really be inspired to just hop on your bike and just enjoy the weather, enjoy your day, put some music on, and just crank those pedals and sing your favorite songs and just really enjoy an underrated sport and a beautiful time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you give this manga a chance. And if you're more of an anime person, I hope you give the anime a chance. If you do, tell me about it. And if you've already watched it, or if you already read it, what do you think? Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you collect it? Do you own a bike? What kind of riding do you like to do? Are you a mountain biker? Do you like to road race? Do you time trial? Do you race? Do you do it for health, weight loss? Do you do it because it's transportation? Do you like fixed gears? Let's talk about bikes. It's bike day. Peace.